So we've reached the end of the worshipping journey, which is actually the beginning, which is kind of cool. So what am I still doing talking? Well, some of you might be wondering why following this pattern of worship is so important. Some of you might be feeling like I'm trying to put a straitjacket on you and you're feeling confined and claustrophobic with all this talk about frameworks and structures. Isn't worship meant to be free? Yes. And structure actually helps us to be free. You see, there's a big difference between freedom and chaos. Here's what I mean. Have you ever played backyard cricket? I love that game. Why it isn't in the Olympics yet, I'll never know. We had this flat when I was at uni and the backyard was kind of pokey. The flat was on this hill, so the yard was terraced, and there was this one little paved section that was flat. That was our pitch where we batted and bowled. And then the house was behind us and down the leg side, and then the terraces were banked up on the off side, and we would arrange chairs to block off the other gaps. Then my friend and I would play for hours. It was actually the confines of the place that allowed us to have fun. The structure fed our creativity. We were forever coming up with new ideas and names for things. If you hit the ball into this bush, you were out. If you could sweep it through the French doors, it was 4 runs. If we tried to play that game in a big, wide open field, it would have been no fun at all. One of us would have spent ages running after the ball, and the other one would have spent ages waiting for him. It's the same in worship. The structure actually makes us free. As we get accustomed to it, it becomes natural. And once it's natural, it's effortless. And something really amazing happens in worship. When we let the rhythm of God's world begin to shape and guide us, you see, we are creatures of habit. We don't cope terribly well if everything is up for grabs and there's no order. People might think that order is the enemy of creativity, but it's not. They might think that structure is the enemy of spontaneity, but it doesn't need to be. As people, we are changed by rhythmic practices, things we do over and over again. We might like to think about worship as the school of the Spirit, because we are practicing life in God's world when we worship. If you listen to God's call every week, if you start to believe that God longs for you to be part of His life, what's that going to do to you? It's going to give you a sense of significance. It's going to teach you that you matter. If you respond to God's grace every week, if you practice saying, thank you, what kind of person are you going to become? Grateful, humble, someone who doesn't take life for granted. If you name your brokenness before God and God's people week after week, if you give up pretending and tell it how it is about yourself and the world you live in, what kind of person will you become? A truthful one, an understanding one, a courageous one. And in response to naming your brokenness within and without, to then hear God's forgiveness and promise of restoration, what's this going to do to you? It's going to make you free, no longer carrying the weight of the world or a sense of your own worthlessness on your shoulders. So far, we're becoming people who know they matter, grateful and humble, truth-telling, understanding, courageous and free, and we're hardly even halfway. Then we listen to God speak. Week after week, we stop the noise of the world and make space for God to tell us a story. What does that practice form in us? It makes us a listening people. People who know they don't have to have all the answers. Trusting and attentive people. Then we come to God's table. We let God meet our needs and come to us in the most ordinary and the most extraordinary of ways. It's bread, but it's Jesus. As we come to the table over and over, we become people who make ourselves dependent on the provision of God. As we gather at the table with all God's people, we learn to love our sisters and brothers. We learn love for strangers and even for enemies. We learn to hope for the time when all our lost siblings are at home. And then we join Jesus in praying for the world. We let our hearts hurt with the pain of the lost, the hungry and the scared. And as we do this, our hearts grow larger, our capacity to love grows. Our capacity to feel pain grows. Our capacity to hold on to hope grows. So we offer our money and our lives to Jesus. As we do this, we become people of generosity because we're learning how to be generous from the Master. We become people of surrender because we are learning surrender from the Master as well. At last, We're sent out, but not sent away. We go with God to share in the task of reaching out and raising up, of seeking and saving, of finding and freeing. Suddenly our whole lives have dignity and direction. Monday is just as holy as Sunday. As we let God send us, we become people of purpose. See, worship is the school of the Spirit. It's where we are working out our salvation, where Jesus' life is happening in us, as we become people of worth and dignity, of gratitude and humility, of courage and compassion, of trust and attentiveness, of generosity, empathy and purpose. This is how God is reshaping us through this ancient journey that makes us new. The biggest question about our worship is not which style, but which story. You can tell this story with hymns. You can tell it with contemporary songs. You can tell it with backing from an organ, a 10-piece band, or a 1-piece tuning fork. You can tell it with responsive readings, with dramas, or with hour-long sermons if you really have to. You can sing it, you can say it, you can even let silence tell it. You can act it out, speak it out, colour it in, and fill it up with who you and your faith family are and are becoming. This framework makes us free to tell the story of God's love for us and through us in all the gloriously varied ways we can muster and imagine. So, are you in?